Okay, so I made this video yesterday that TikTok has now taken down for community guidelines violations. And yes, I've appealed it, and it will become apparent in just a moment why they have taken issue with it. But in that video, I'm discussing the NSPM 7, which is this memorandum that the Trump regime put out. It's trying to frame Antifa as a terrorist organization when Antifa is not an organization at all. It's just an ideology. It just means being opposed to fascism. So in my original video that TikTok has taken down, I was like, oh, they're doing this so they can basically call anybody that they don't like Antifa. This is an intimidation measure to be like, if you speak out against us, if you organize against us, if we don't like your politics, if you're critical of the regime, we'll just slap this label Antifa terrorist on you, and then we'll get to bring up charges or do whatever we want to you, take away the money of your organization, right? I think a component of this is wanting to investigate Act Blue. And Donald Trump has tried similar shit during his first term. And he's even tried similar shit earlier in this term because they're desperate to crush any political opposition, right? They don't want anybody standing up against them. But in that video, I referenced Timothy Snyder talking about moral panics or social panics. And I was like, this is also a form of a social panic where they are trying to get people who are on their side politically to be afraid of their neighbors. They want conservatives to believe that anybody who criticizes Donald Trump is a domestic terrorist. The regime wants Americans to believe that anybody who takes up an anti-fascist position is a terrorist, when really they are just opposed to the fascist regime that is dismantling American democracy. Like, being anti-fascist is being pro-American, being pro-democracy, pro-liberty, pro-freedom. It's not a terrorist organization because Antifa is not an organization at all. The reason that I think TikTok took down my video is because I likened what is happening now to a particular panic that we had in the 1980s. It rhymes with manic panic, but there's more syllables. Just Google the band Ghost and then you'll understand what I mean. But if you make references to that subject, your video is likely going to get flagged and taken down. However, multiple people in the comments were like, Angela, I think this is closer to the Red Scares that we had in this country. This is like Red Scare 3. And I think that's true. I think that's a fair assessment of what is happening right now. And as with everything that this regime is doing, it is a propaganda war. It is about fucking with your head and making you afraid to take action against the oppression of the government, or to make you afraid of your neighbor, because they want us to be paranoid and isolated. They don't want us connecting with our neighbors, because the way that we come together and have enough power to stop this is that we have to come together, is that we have to work with other people who might be very different from us, right? But we are all opposed to fascism. We are all opposed to the tyranny of the regime, and we can come together and partner around that. They know that our collective power is far greater than any kind of fragile semblance of power that they're wielding now. So they don't want us to realize that collective power of the American people is the kind of power that can stop fascism. There are millions and millions more of us than there are of them, and they don't want us to realize that. They want to make us afraid of people who should be our allies against fascism, right? So one of the things that I have noticed. Okay, hang on. So slight diversion here for a second. In my original video, I said maybe what we could do is we could just stop using the term Antifa. If they've poisoned it, if they've spoiled it to try and make it sound like something really scary. Someone in my comments said, oh, it has the same number of some syllables as Al-Qaeda, right? Antifa, Al-Qaeda. And so they're trying to make that association in the minds of conservatives that this is a terrorist organization, when it's not an organization at all. It just means anti-fascist. Somebody who is opposed to fascism might use the term Antifa to describe themselves. And I was like, well, why, if they're so determined to poison that term, why can't we just call ourselves anti-fascist, right? Why can't we just make it a little bit longer and then we deprive them of their narrative? But I've actually seen people who have a better response than mine, which is that a lot of people who look like me and older, a lot of middle-aged and older white ladies have been like, Antifa? Okay, I'm your Antifa, right? And I've seen people on Facebook who change their name or their profile pic to say, I'm your Auntie Fa. And I think it really effectively subverts the narrative that the regime is trying to put forward, right? It really steals their thunder because they want to put forth this image of Antifa. Anybody that they label as Antifa, they want you to be afraid of them. They want you to think that they are like the Fox News depiction of some black bloc kid with, you know, their Doc Martens and wearing all black and their face covered, and they're like throwing a Molotov cocktail, right? This image that strikes fear into the heart of conservatives. So if you're like, oh no, I'm your Antifa, and I look like, you know, like your middle school librarian, or I look like your mother-in-law, I look like your average middle-aged white lady from the suburbs. Like I don't look like a violent terrorist because I'm not a violent terrorist. I'm just an American citizen who wants to reestablish the rule of law and does not want fascism in the United States. I think it's really genius. And what the regime wanted was to chill dissent. They wanted people to be afraid to call themselves anti-fascist. They wanted people to be afraid to criticize the regime, to say, I'm Antifa. And it's having the opposite effect. I'm seeing people who do not look like what Fox News thinks a protester looks like. We're like, oh yeah, I'm Antifa. This is me. This is me. This is what we look like. This is who we truly are. And it's the same sort of stealing the narrative from them that we saw around No King's Day when they tried to depict protesters who showed up to No King's Day as anti-American, right? Mike Johnson was out there, so cringe, so embarrassing for him. Like, what an absolute fail. Mike Johnson, you're a failure. He tried to put forth this false narrative that everybody who turned up to No King's Day was anti-American and it was an I Hate America rally. Cool, okay, well, then we're all just showing up with American flags and Lady Liberty shirts. We're all showing up with our Lady Liberty, and we're showing that we love America. Lots of patriotic imagery, lots of people singing the national anthem, right? Just totally stealing Mike Johnson's thunder and making him look like a complete boob, because he is one. I think there's the potential for this now, right? The regime wants you to be scared. The point of that memo was to scare the shit out of anybody who is organizing against the regime and for democracy. The point of that memo was to conjure up something like a Red Scare in this country. It's not working. And I'm so proud of the way that we are watching Americans all over this country refuse to cower, refuse to be afraid. We are watching people who are willing to take on personal risk. Yeah, on one hand, you know, a year ago, it'd be funny if you made a joke like, I'm Auntie Fa. Yet now it's serious because they'll come for you. Somebody that I know has been reminding me in my comments that she called her congressman, Cliff Bentz, in Eastern Oregon. He's the only Republican congressman in Oregon. He's a big Trump supporter, even though both of the counties in my state that have the highest use of SNAP, he's the congressman for both of those counties, and he's made sure that his own constituents are going to be deprived of necessary food starting November 1st. Anyway, so this person was talking with Cliff Bentz's aide on the phone, expressing her concern as a constituent, and that aide threatened to turn her into the FBI for being an Antifa terrorist. A congressman's aide threatened to turn in a constituent to the FBI, claiming that she was an Antifa terrorist because she was expressing discontent, frustration with the illegal actions of the regime. I mean, I, for one, would love to hear Congressman Cliff Bentz's explanation, his response to one of his aides accusing one of his constituents of being a terrorist and threatening her. We're not going to get that response from Cliff Bentz, but hey, all of y'all in Eastern Oregon, you want to organize for the primaries? Get Cliff Bentz out. I'm sure lots of people all around the state would support you in that effort. And I guess the real takeaway from this conversation is not to be intimidated, not to be fearful. All the regime has is fear and intimidation. All they have is threats. And so we're not going to give them a win. The thing that we need to be doing is thinking about how we can subvert the narrative, how we can take control of the narrative, how we can make them look like fools. How can we prove them wrong? How can we use their messaging against them? So instead of being afraid to exercise your First Amendment right to criticize the government for fear of being labeled an Antifa terrorist and brought up on terrorism charges, this is what we're living through in America. Yeah, Red Scare 3. Instead of being frightened into submission, into obeying, when the regime puts out that kind of rhetoric, how do we decide that we're going to get control of the narrative? How do we say, fuck you, make me? How do we say, no, I'm not going along with that. In fact, I'm going to make you look like a complete fool for even trying this. So to all of the middle-aged ladies, all of the grannies who are out there being like, I'm your Auntie Fa now, thank you. I think that that's a real excellent demonstration of how we handle situations like this, with bravery, with humor, and with defiance.